We are pleased to welcome back to PCN Life a Duxbury resident, a local author, an attorney, a coach, a real estate investor, Darin Colucci. It's great to have you back.
Nice to see you again, my friend.
Nice
How
to
are
have
you?
you back.
Thank
And we're
you.
lucky to have you on our board of directors now, too.
I'm honored. I've
Yes.
enjoyed that so far. Thank you.
We love to have you.
Thank you.
We're talking for the third time about a book that you wrote.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's called Everything I Never Learned in School, and it's about a guide to success.
Yes.
Now, I read it, loved it, sent it to my kids. We talked a little bit about it before, but for those people who did not see your first two interviews, can you just give a brief bio of the book?
Sure. It has become a passion of my life to try to help people figure out basically how to be happy. So even though success is in the title, it's as much about finding happiness as anything else, because as I grew up, I found out most people just weren't happy. They weren't happy in their job, they weren't happy in their relationship, everybody's unhappy. So I set out to figure out why, and there is a formula to be happy and successful and fulfilled, and I committed it to paper, and I'm very proud of it. It's done very well, and it's seemingly helping a lot of people.
Yeah. I've followed you on your website, and a lot of different ages and different groups really have honed in on this. Now, in your table of contents of your book, you really talk about the chapters. It all begins with your thoughts. Don't let fear get in your way. Always ask for advice. Can you kind of just give a rundown of how you chaptered this book?
I think very logically. I think in a linear fashion.
Okay.
So I decided the best way to do it is to lay out the steps in order.
Right.
So I tried to think of what is the very first thing that holds people back and make that the first thing they're going to deal with in the book.
Okay.
So one thing leads to another.
Yeah.
And then when they've conquered that, they say, okay, I'm ready for step 2. And step 2 is actually step 2, not step 25,
Right.
and then you go back.
Yeah.
And it's worked. People read that and they say the way it's laid out really made sense to them.
Yeah.
And that's just what people are telling me. I really appreciate the compliments, but I've heard that more than just about anything.
Right.
That it reaches them on a level where it really makes sense.
Right.
It's real world advice that they can put into practice right away. And that's why I laid out the chapters the way I did.
That you did. Okay. Now, we've talked about how, like I said, gee, I wish I had had this when I was in school, that it would have been really helpful as a high school student, even a junior high student. But you found that age group isn't engaging as much as the older age group. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's been a shocker. I wrote it for younger people.
Right.
The goal when I put pen to paper was I'm going to help these young people avoid all these things that we've had to deal with in our life.
Exactly.
So then I write it and I find out that people in their 40s and 50s and 60s are reading it and changing their lives. But I was having trouble getting people who were 18, 19, and 20. To them, I think it was homework. They were looking at it like, their teacher gave them the Andromeda strain and said, you got to read this. So I have to get in front of them somehow.
Yeah.
And I've really tried to talk to principals and, in one instance, someone who's in charge of education for the county to say, can you just give me a little time, not just a class, but maybe an assembly, maybe just a way to get in front of them so I can explain why this book is different. This book is a collection of wisdom. Wisdom you can't learn in school.
Right.
It's just not going to help you. Wisdom is how you're going to get from A to B and take all the education that you learned in school and put it into practice to make yourself successful and, most importantly, happy.
That's right, and make you happy. So sometimes I guess people have to learn it for themselves. It's like Dorothy, next time I go looking for my heart's desire, I won't look past my own backyard. I mean, sometimes you really have to go through the experience yourself. So how can parents who've been through many of experiences help students navigate through and understand how valuable the lessons in this book are to them?
One of the reasons the book is successful is, I think, when the reader starts getting into it, the book builds credibility. And as they're going through it, they start believing the stories and seeing them because it's all making sense. Well, I can't talk to every single person that may read it.
Right.
Who has more credibility than a parent? So if a parent said to a child over dinner, hey, look, this summer you have this reading list that you have to read, that you don't want to read. I got something for you to read that's going to help you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And don't think of it as homework. Think of it as this is the roadmap to success, happiness, and fulfillment. And it'll take you about 2.5 hours to read it.
Right.
It's this big.
Right.
But you got to read it by the end of the summer. And I think if they could just get the kids at that age, 16, 17, 18, it'll help their decision making. It'll help their outlook. It'll help their positive mindset because they'll see real world examples of how it's helping people and, more importantly, how it holds people back. They'll be now in tune to it. And that's why I think parents should get involved. It's like anything. If your kids aren't doing it and it's good for them, somehow you got to nudge them in the right direction. It's your job as a parent.
Right. And I loved when I read this, the different examples you used they're not people that have like been dead for 100 years. You know,
No.
I mean, you give a couple examples of people that you quote or people that you use in this book.
Well, on purpose, there were a number of people that you have heard of, and more importantly, people that you haven't heard of.
Right.
And the reason is, I have this theory that if you talk about Oprah and you talk about George Clooney, people just see them as different. They're life's lottery winners, and they're great looking, or just super smart, or it's somebody like the guy who runs Tesla, Elon Musk. They're different than us.
Oh yeah.
So I gave examples of like Sarah Blakey, who started Spanx.
Yeah, who's Sarah Blakey?
No one knows, but she's a self-made billionaire.
Yeah, because of Spanx.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure I had a number of women in there because I wanted young ladies to know, hey, you can do it too.
Yeah.
I don't know what anyone's telling you at home or at school,
Yeah.
but you're no different than anybody else.
Right.
If you follow these steps, you can be that successful. And one of the second or third steps is you have to be able to see yourself as being successful.
Right.
If you think it's impossible,
Right.
it's not going to work for you.
That's
you
right.
have to be able to get to a point where you say, you know something, I can do it too. I don't have to be George Clooney. I can do it too.
Right.
And then you're really 90% of the way there. No one believes that. Once you accept that it's possible,
Right.
you're 90%
Of the way
your
there.
goal.
Last time we were together, you said the most successful people in the world are no different than you and me.
It's so
Talk
true.
about that.
They were lost as children. Some of them, many of them, didn't graduate college.
Right.
Now, I'm not advocating not going to college.
Right.
I'm just pointing out that there's more than one way to get where you want to be.
Right.
So when I started researching this and talking to people and learning about people and reading biographies, I found out they had every problem you and I have.
Yep.
They had a failed marriage. They were lousy students. They had dyslexia and never told anybody.
Yeah.
In some cases, they had some terrible thing that happened to them as a child. But they persevered,
Right.
and they somehow either intuitively understood this or somebody explained it to them. They had a mentor
Right.
that said, let me show you how to do this.
Right.
And they laid out the steps, they followed the steps, and they became this superstar that people look at now and say, oh my God, that person's phenomenal.
Right.
No, they're just like you or me.
Right.
They just understood this information.
And your point about every single step you take, if you fail, it's not really a failure because...
It's built into it.
Yeah.
You're going to have some miscalculations here and there.
Absolutely.
I don't know of a single person. Think about the most successful people on earth.
Yeah.
Their trajectory was not like this.
No.
It went,
Yep.
and they kept trending upward like a good stock. It goes down, but it keeps trending upward.
Right.
So they look at things differently, and that's part of what we're teaching in this book is mindset.
Yeah.
They look at a failure as a course correction. It's, okay, where did I go wrong there?
Yep.
That's where the answer is. You know something, now that I've solved that problem, now your line shoots up.
Right.
And then you run into another problem. The most successful people, the richest people, are the ones that solve problems.
Right.
Every tremendously successful person saw a problem that everyone else saw as insurmountable.
Yeah.
And said, I'm going to go over it, under it, or through it.
Yeah,
But I'm
but I'm
getting
gonna
to
get
the
to
other
it. Right,
side.
right.
And when they do, they get all the marbles.
Right. So talking about this really helps. I noticed just after reading your book and then talking to you about it, it brought a lot more things clear to me. Now, you are going to have the opportunity of actually having a show on a radio station.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Talk about that.
Well, it so feeds into what we were talking about, because one of the things in the book is you have to have goals.
Right.
And sometimes you're not positive how you're going to get there. And that stops people.
Yeah.
They have this tremendous goal and they think, well, but I don't know how to do it. I thought, I got to reach more people. I would love a radio show.
Yeah.
I really didn't do anything to make that happen. And then somebody called me from Dash Radio. It's a satellite radio station that wants to compete with Sirius.
With
and said,
Sirius, yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
we read your book and we love it and we'd like to know, would you like to have a 1-hour show? I said,
that's great.
I couldn't have said yes fast enough. Now I have no radio experience whatsoever. Zero.
Yep.
So I felt what everybody else feels. Do I know how to do this? Am I going to be any good at it? Am I cut out for it? But I immediately said, yes, I'll figure it out.
That's right.
And again, one of the things you want to talk about in the book, you try to get across to people, is that feeling is common. It's human nature. But
Right.
don't let it stop you, for God's sakes. Don't let that be the thing that holds you back, that I
Right.
simply don't know how to do it.
That's right.
So Richard Branson said, whenever you get a great opportunity, say yes and then figure it out.
Right, right.
He's 100% right.
Don't say no.
And
right.
that's what I did.
Any
with
way you
this.
can do it, you should do it.
Correct.
Okay. So the book is Everything I Never Learned in School, Guide to Success by Darin Colucci. You can read it. You can read it with your kids. You can give it to your parents. You can give it to anybody. And there's no age group that won't benefit from it, I don't think. I mean, I've read it 3 times now. And I just love it because it's, you know what it is? It's uplifting. It's absolutely uplifting, and it makes anybody think that anything is possible.
Yeah,
And
it's been overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
I had someone write to me who's 59 years old, which is not old, but
Yep.
it's not 20.
Yep.
And she said, I've always had a dream of doing something. I read your book, and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
She said, I left my job, I have enough money to try this, and I'm setting out on my own course to do my own thing. And I couldn't have had a better compliment.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
that's great.
thrilling.
That's
It really
wonderful.
was. Thank you very much.
Tells it all.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll have you back sometime in the future.
Anytime you
All
want.
right,
I want
sir.
to have you on my show.
Okay.
All right. I'm telling you. You're
We'll
going to come
talk
on my
about that.
show.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.